We light this chalice, the symbol of our faith, knowing that this morning many others across this land and around the world are doing the same. For us and for our far-flung kin, it is a light of peace, of justice, and of love. But without work, these aspirations flicker out as soon as the candle is extinguished. Let us join together to accept the challenge of doing the hard work that makes these aspirations real. I had the honor of attending a memorial service on Friday night for a friend's mom. But it wasn't just a service, it was also a concert. And it wasn't a small affair. Based on the capacity of the venue we were in, I'd estimate there were about 1,600 folks in attendance. And it was by far one of the most powerful experiences I have ever been a part of. You see, my friend's name is Toshi Regan, and she was named after Pete Seeger's wife, Toshi Seeger, who had become good friends with Toshi's mom, the woman we were honoring, Bernice Johnson Regan. In case you don't know, Bernice Johnson Regan was a part of a group of 4 young folks that became known as the Freedom Singers back in the 60s, a part of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. These were just 4 young folks, all under the age of 20, that felt called to lend their voices to protest the injustices that they had seen and had experienced growing up in Albany, Georgia. Cordell Regan, one of the SNCC field secretaries, was the founding member of the Freedom Singers. SNCC planned and funded the Freedom Singers tours and paid the members $10 to $20 a week to work as field secretaries for the movement. These young field secretaries were usually dropped off in communities where they had to arrange their own food and lodgings. And I know from conversations with Toshi that Bernice would use a payphone along the way to coordinate the stops with Toshi Seeger, who was helping Pete Seeger organize parts of these tours. Often group members would stay with families, helping with chores and educating children. This group traveled 50,000 miles between 1962 and 1963, visiting 48 of the 50 states to help educate communities and strengthen the resistance movement. As reported in the African American Registry, the Reverend Dr. King called music the soul of the movement. And however, although the civil rights movement is closely associated with music, attempts to educate the public through music were not common at the time. The SNCC Freedom Singers were an exception, blending spoken and musical communication to inform the public. This was before social media, remember. Bernice Johnson Regan once stated that the Freedom Singers were, in fact, a singing newspaper. Singing together gave protesters strength to participate and demonstrate in freedom rides and to endure jail time, verbal and physical assaults, police dog attacks, and high-pressure fire hoses aimed at them. Singing these songs united the protesters in their shared goals, freedom and equality. And their work culminated in the performance to over 350,000 people on the March in Washington. We're missing some slides. Something got messed up, but that's okay. Friday night's event was simply a continuation of this tradition. The music performed by friends and aunts and cousins and others was perhaps the most soul-stirring, powerful performances I have ever experienced. 2 of the original Freedom Singers came to the stage and sang one of their songs. Now both nearly 90, none of the power had left either of their voices, and their performance brought the house down. Interspersed with this were spoken word pieces by Bernice's granddaughter, her wife, poets, authors, and activists who wove not only the story of this person's life, but also helped us see that her individual legacy was simply a small part of a much larger resistance movement that has been going on for hundreds of years and whose work continues today, perhaps now more importantly than ever. I can't begin to tell you the number of lessons I took away from this experience. And you can be pretty sure I'll do a full sermon based on Bernice Johnson's life at some point in the future. But today's sermon, as all should be, is about this community. Here today, on Volunteer Recognition Sunday, in this moment of history when many of us are both gripped by fear of what we are seeing in the world and simultaneously feeling unsure about what to do about it, the family and community I witnessed on stage Friday night shared the complete blueprint for all that we need to help guide our efforts. If only we will be willing to listen and then to act. At one point, Toshi said to us, "You have everything you need to overcome any injustice in the world. My ancestors gave you the toolbox and the evidence that it can work. All you need to be willing to do is to commit to putting the tools in practice." Somewhere along the line, maybe 10 or 15 years or so ago it feels, we really began to see a lot of popular culture reflecting a pessimistic view that perhaps we were entering the end of times. Movies, songs, books, there was this wave of apocalyptic sentiment that began washing over the airwaves. Art usually serves as a siren song for our collective conscience. And whether it's environmental degradation, the rapidly widening gap between the haves and the have-nots, or ever-increasing images of violence on the streets and around the world, there was this sense that things were just going in the wrong direction. Now, there are a couple of very well-established ways to organize folks into action. One of those ways is through fear, which is unfortunately the easier of the two ways. Play on folks' fears, identify groups of folks that you can pin the blame on, who, for the record, are very rarely the actual source of the problem. And you can ignite a firestorm of anger that coalesces around a Savior that promises to fix all of those problems once and for all. History has repeatedly shown us the outcome of that path. As the sage Yoda reminds us, fear leads to anger, and anger leads to hate, and hate leads to suffering. Every single time. This sentiment can be traced all the way back to ancient wisdom. Our ancestors knew this truth and have been trying to warn us of this reality since time immemorial. But there is another way. It's just not quite as easy. It actually takes a great deal of intentional effort. But it is the only path humans have ever found towards any level of collective peace and prosperity. It is the path of community, centered in love. Exactly what we try to practice here in this church week after week, year after year, and decade after decade. The thing I always realize when I speak to Toshi is not that she's a powerful singer and storyteller. It's not that her mom was a famous singer and that her name is in the history books. No, what you really realize is that her family is just a family, just like any of ours. The stories they tell are just of cousins coming over to share a meal, or their church getting together to celebrate someone's commitment ceremony, and then breaking bread together and developing new memories. It's about raising kids and helping each other when one or more is struggling. Their family just happened to be doing these things at a pivotal moment in history, and they decided to get involved. Which is no different than what I have seen this community attempting to do together, and no different than the times that we are living in right now, today. The world needs the skills that this community has been practicing together for the past 25 years now more than ever. But this community honestly is at a crossroads which will determine whether it continues to act as a catalyst for positive change in the world or if it will fizzle out and end up in the dustbin of fading memories. And it's the people in this room or online or those that have had to miss this Sunday but will be here next week that will determine which path this community takes. Because you see, as I said, the path of a community like this is not the easy path. Over the past few decades, it would seem that our society has forgotten the importance of the lessons our ancestors have tried to pass down. The realization that we cannot survive alone, that we need each other not only to survive, but to thrive. I was listening to NPR the other day, and even though the story wasn't specifically about finance or the economy, every time the speaker referenced what could have been labeled as citizens or Americans, he used the word consumers. And I think that was intentional. And I thought a lot about that. How does that label make you feel? Is it appropriate? What, if anything, do you do besides consume? Trust me when I say I am not up here pointing a finger. I have really wrestled with this question. I wrestle with it when I'm trying to get my kids to pull their heads up from their screens. I wrestle with it when I'm drawn to engage in a favorite pastime instead of doing something that is perhaps more important but not urgent. My personal struggle as an introvert is picking up the phone to make a call that I probably should, but that I can easily pass by because I assume someone else in the community will just take care of it. That is the thing that I need to work on. I think about every time my concept of what I know, perhaps I could be doing for something that I know is larger and more important than myself, bumps into an overwhelming draw towards comfort. The event that I attended on Friday night reminded me that comfort cannot be our highest aspiration. It just can't be. Because if each of us is only seeking our own individual comforts, then we are nothing more than a collection of individual egos competing for fewer and fewer available resources. And we can all see where this leads. We've been blindly careening down this path for a long time, and so long, in fact, that it is really hard to consider calling us anything other than that word that was used on NPR, consumers. We need to remember to go back to an older way. But we also need to learn the lessons of the mistakes we made along the way that led us to build communities not only of our own, but while other communities got left behind. On Friday night, Toshi did talk about her place in the Black community, but she also devoted a part of her words to the importance of supporting our trans siblings or our immigrant siblings who are currently the targets of some of the fear-mongering that is already leading to increased violence and displacement of these communities. Now is the time, my friends. And if you think some things need to change in the world, you are the only ones that can be the change that you want to see. The seeds have to be replanted in this garden that you have been tending over the past 25 years. There is a whole generation of folks that have been drawn away from churches because of the hypocrisy that has been practiced by so many of them. Our model, this faith that you have hitched your wagons to, has the potential to lead the world in a new way. We have no hierarchy. Each UU church like this one is a self-guided entity with no power structure above telling you what to do or what to believe. This faith puts the burden on each of us to responsibly consider what is happening in the world around us right now, and then to align our actions with what is needed to ensure our collective ongoing survival. There are so many young people today struggling with anxiety and depression and malaise simply because our society has gotten to be really good at distracting us from challenge and soothing our discomforts, but completely forgetting that the solution can only be found collectively in shared community. To the founders of this place who are still here among us, I know that you are tired. I know how hard you have worked to develop the gift that this community is that we all benefit from today. And I think the reason that you are tired is that unlike past generations, the next generation has been distracted away from the lesson this community was built to remember and share. And there are less folks here now to pick up the torch that I know you are probably very ready to hand off. The community I witnessed on Friday has used the vibration of song for thousands of years to help keep their energy alive. So folks, when we have the opportunity to sing together, I'm going to challenge you to really start singing together. Sing out loud. Even if you sound terrible at first, even if your voice quakes, when we sing our closing hymn today, sing it out loud. We need to feed each other. I promise you, if we all just do that, you will begin to feel some energy. And it has the potential to feed you perhaps for more than just one day or one more meeting. And the more we practice this way, the more power our collective singing will have. But even more importantly than that, to all of you that are younger or perhaps newer to this community, my charge today is to you. This community, this world needs you more than you can imagine. And I know that the problems you see in this world feel daunting. And I know that the demands this world places on us today are overwhelming. We are all being forced to run faster and faster on the treadmill just to keep up. At the same time, the safety nets that we used to think we could rely upon are being torn asunder. Truth is even under attack, making it harder and harder to understand what threats are real and which ones are simply manufactured. All of these ills can be healed in a community such as this one. Our elders have seen more than we have and are likely better at identifying long-term trends versus unimportant distractions. And at the same time, our younger folks are becoming savvier at online communication and outreach, and we need their knowledge to help get our message out to those that need it most. Help to pick up the torch. Lend your efforts to our vision. And if you think you have found something here that is needed in the world, don't be afraid to tell your friends that you've started going to church like no other, and invite them to come along. Our seeds need to be spread to continue to feed the world. My time up here is short, and the number of things I want to share always far outpaces the space I have to share it, or the likelihood that I can keep you as the heat comes up and it gets nicer and nicer outside. So here today, on Volunteer Recognition Sunday, I'm going to try to wrap up with a call to action. Please, 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 when you go to the social hall, talk to the folks that are lined up behind the different committees' recruitment signs you've been seeing in the social hall all month. Ask questions. Don't just think about what may sound like too big of a commitment to sign up for, like agreeing to serve on a committee that meets once a month. Ask the folks what they're working on. Ask them what they need. And if you ask enough people enough questions, at some point you will find a need that perfectly aligns with both the skill and the current capacity you have with that need expressed. It is those initial connections that the seeds of this community are nourished and watered. That is the process that has led each and every person in this room here today. Someone had an idea, which turned into a plan, which created a set of needs, which were executed by some people until a church community was made. A community that raised a generation of kids with the skills needed to be able to analyze the deluge of information that is coming at them and make positive choices for themselves, their families, and their communities. A community that shows up together for causes and to help those in need. A community that supports each other through their struggles. A community where every member knows that they do not have to face the challenges of the world alone. I will leave you with a couple of quotes I heard at Bernice's memorial. These quotes speak to the realities of the work I'm calling you to do, because false promises of future good times granted without effort are spoken only by false prophets. Bernice said, "If you're feeling comfortable, you're probably not in coalition. There is nowhere you can go and only be with people who like you. give that up. Folks that have been here for a long time, like, that's true, right? You can't just like be in community and like everybody. That's not what it's about. Everybody has got to be welcomed. Everybody's got to find their place, and we've got to find ways to work together. This was another powerful line she shared. The line of safety that your ancestors taught you never to cross to survive just may be the line you need to be willing to cross to live. And finally, if you see something missing, it is probably your own voice. Join me, beloveds. We are the only ones that can ever hope to bring the change about in the world that we hope to see. Blessed be. Our closing words are by John C. Morgan. In the end, it won't matter how much we have, but how generously we have given. It won't matter how much we know, but rather how well we live. And it won't matter how much we believe, but how deeply we love.